Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm honored to be for the first time in the European Parliament building. I'm very grateful for the invitation by Mrs. Bearder and her colleagues to be here. And I'm very proud to be associated with FERN's 20th anniversary as an organization that's really been in the front lines of global work to support forests and the rights of forest peoples. We're here today because our supermarkets have been converted into crime scenes. And that wasn't supposed to happen. Large farms and ranches are clearing millions of hectares of tropical forests for soy, beef, palm oil, sugar and cocoa, much of it for export. That process is fueling climate change to a very large extent and is displacing an ever-growing number of traditional communities. And much of that process is not simply unsustainable, it's patently illegal. A recent forest trend study shows that about half of all that deforestation is clearly against the law. And while that forest trend study focuses only on environmental laws and laws related to land rights, that's only part of the story. Because ranchers out there are falsifying documents to steal public lands, and they're clearing protected forests. Palm oil companies are paying bribes, but not taxes, and they use thugs to quell dissent. This is even a story of murder, and several weeks ago we've seen it once again when Asia Pulp and Paper guards killed Indra Pelani, a 22-year-old villager in Sumatra. And unfortunately, Europe is directly at the heart of this. In 2012, about 1/4 of illegal exports ended up in Europe, worth some 6 billion euros, as we heard in the introduction. And the Commission itself has concluded that Europe was one of the largest importers of the illegal results of global tropical deforestation. All in all, farmers and companies have deforested an area larger than Portugal just to supply Europe's markets. So that means that European consumers have crime in their meat, crime in their sweets, even crime in their shampoo. Banks are sending money to criminals and receiving the proceeds of crime. And company supply chains include some very dodgy players. So we're talking about a real problem here. None of us wants our juicy steaks, for those who still eat meat, or just desserts to come from death or environmental destruction. That isn't civilized, and that isn't us. And what's so ironic about all of this is that Europe has always been a leader when it comes to forests. Europe's FLEG action plan helped to galvanize a global movement against illegal logging. It helped put forest governance issues on the world agenda and is gradually making progress on that agenda. FLEG is a process that's not just about illegal logging, it's about forest people's rights. And as I was reminded this morning, the FLEG trade agreement process is in fact the first set of trade agreements in the world that were negotiated with the full participation of communities and forest peoples. In addition to that, European funding for forests has been on the rise despite a weak economy. Europe, as we heard, has even committed itself to having tropical deforestation by 2020 and to end it 10 years later. And Europe can and should be proud of all that. FLEG has been very good when it comes to wood and timber, but it hasn't dealt much with pastures and crops. And that's crucial, since clearing forests for agriculture is actually now the largest cause of land grabbing and forest deforestation, and deforestation, excuse me. And we're not talking about subsistence farmers. We're talking about big farmers, big firms, global supply chains. And so somehow, Europe is going to have to address that global food print. No one wants to be complicit in crime. The 7th Environmental Plan talks about a possible action plan on deforestation and degradation, and this is clearly an opportune moment for bringing that to the agenda. So what would a plan like that, what could it mean, what would it mean, what might it mean, how might we go about it? I think a good starting point would be to start with the best of FLEG and the FLEG process. First, FLEG is a partnership. It's not about blaming other people or other countries. It's not presented as a producer problem. Everyone understood that it was a consumer, an investor, a supply chain problem. It was a problem of all of those concerned. It wasn't presented as an African problem or an Asian problem, but a problem that was deeply European. In a situation where all sides must do their part and no one can drop the ball. FLEG also showed the value of leveraging Europe's economic and political tools to strengthen Southern reformers. Trade is obviously a part of that in trade policy, but so is political support for reform and development cooperation. It means helping communities to defend their forests, supporting reformist bureaucrats in the South, independent monitoring, and supporting champions of human rights. The FLEG process has helped to strengthen local advocates, even in some rather fragile states where it's clearly hard to make quick progress. And so clearly, to get anywhere on something as intractable as the issues we're talking about, deep-seated governance problems, deep-seated impunity, is going to take a long-term commitment, and it's going to take well-informed and well-motivated staff. We're going to have to learn as we go, try, adapt, and learn some more. Finally, FLEG's approach is comprehensive, and any new action plan would also have to be. Consumers must consider what they buy and have the facts to make sound decisions. And when we talk about consumers, we're not just talking about individuals, because the biggest buyers are actually businesses and government. So their contracts, their procurement must ensure legal sources. The UK's palm oil procurement policy, the Dutch work on sustainable trade, are steps in that direction and things that we can learn from. EU biofuel and biomass policies also drive some of this illegal process through their support for consumption. Right now, they're only making problems worse, promoting palm oil grown on peat soils that were illegally burnt in Southeast Asia, or clearing forests for pellets in the south of the United States. And clearly an action plan would have to address those issues. Companies, many companies, are now agreeing to respect land rights and avoid deforestation, and they deserve all of our praise and all of our support. They're going to need help to clean their supply chains. It's not a simple or easy thing to do. And they're going to need independent monitoring to check and inform the world what they've done. They also need a level playing field so that others that seek to break the laws and work around the system aren't allowed to jump ahead, and that means regulation. Banks and investors are going to have to understand these issues much more than they have in the past, and they're going to have to learn that there are actually laws against funding criminals and receiving the proceeds from crime. Southern governments are going to need carrots and they're going to need sticks to bring them to the table. What those carrots and sticks are will differ in each case, but they clearly have to be there. So in conclusion, Europe has a problem, but there are solutions. Consumers deserve legal food. They deserve fuel that comes from legal sources. And they deserve to feel proud about the way their system works. The villagers in the South, the people in the forests, deserve to live in peace without their lands being stolen from out from under from them. And surely that is not too much to ask. Thank you.